Hi there everyone. Today I'm reviewing The Young Alexander, The Making of Alexander the Great by Alex Rowson. So in The Young Alexander, we have a kind of whistle-stop tour through the influences on the great commander and king. We examine the events and people that shaped possibly the greatest conqueror the world's ever seen. And this book focuses on the conqueror as a young man, how he ended up taking this path and trying to get a picture of his character. There's few figures of more interest to me personally. He was a superlative commander with towering ambition. He was taught by Aristotle and fathered by Philip II of Macedon, who is often underappreciated in my opinion, and conquered a vast landmass stretching from all the way from Greece to India. So what part did his upbringing play in his achievements is the kind of question that this book tries to answer. And the book approaches this in a fairly predictable way. It covers his parents, Macedonian society, kind of provides a background of that, to the political position and status of Macedon with the other Greek city-states. Moving on to his close friends who would take a large part in his achievements and what would happen to the Macedonian Empire, and goes on to the wars with Thrace and the rise of Alexander in his responsibilities and successes under Philip. So starting near the beginning then, early on we do encounter Aristotle, who has, of course, had a massive influence on philosophy, Western culture and thinking, science, drama and more. We don't really know a massive amount about their relationship though, although Rowson tends to surmise that probably, as in other instances with Alexander, the young prince was probably trying to impress at all times and be the best. Ultimately, the analysis doesn't really have a huge amount to go off. We don't know a huge amount. But clearly Alexander had an excellent teacher in Aristotle, and possibly one of the best you could ask for. And much like his books, sometimes Aristotle was probably a little dry, direct, and did not suffer fools gladly. Unfortunately for him, Alexander was anything but a fool. Alexander was, as anyone who has read anything about him will know, thrust into challenge from an early age. He had already held administrative responsibilities, probably around the age of 16, likely earlier. And by 20 years old, he was already king. By 21, he was fighting his first battle, putting down rebellion at the Greek city of Thebes. The Macedonian upbringing then was something Philip deemed important, and it looks like this investment paid off. Chapter 4 starts off with the great story of Alexander demonstrating his confidence and ingenuity. Philonikos, the horse dealer, comes to the Macedonian court and sells King Philip a Pharsalian stallion. Philip grows angry at the horse, though, as despite it already being broken in, it proves skittish and stubborn. Alexander loudly proclaims, though, that he could manage it better, and he goes on to do so, noticing that it was scared of a shadow. This story sets the stall for much of the book. There's a lot of entertaining kind of stories or interesting anecdotes, and it provides a glimpse of the character of Alexander. But perhaps this kind of forms it as a book not quite so rigorous or discerning. Not that the story that I've just mentioned is necessarily untrue, but there's less of an emphasis on the provenance of the sources than just enjoyment of the tale. One of the best sections of the book is that on Thrace. Not much was really kept in terms of writings or what we know about the various tribes inhabiting Thrace, and they rarely acted conformly as one unit. There was a lot of disparate tribes, with the exception of unification under Sitalkes, the Odrysian king. But the warring tribes were swiftly defeated and subjugated by Philip, and this really opened the path up to Asia. But as the author notes, this is often a kind of set of events that are kind of neglected by historians. And I think Rowson does a really good job from the, and I'm going to attempt to pronounce this, Panagyurishte treasures, that can't be correct, to the defeat and subjugation of Thrace by Philip, he does a really good job here. He really casts a bit of light as much as he can, and kind of it makes for a really interesting section of the book. I want to open with a quote here from page 146. Open quote. Aristotle also uses another word in the poem that the later historian Arrian would use to define Alexander's inner drive to do and see new and extraordinary things. Pothos, an ardent desire or longing. It was Pothos that made him climb the Gordian Acropolis to examine the fabled Gordian knot. Pothos that drove his decision to found the city of Alexandria in Egypt. Pothos that made him send an expedition to explore the Caspian Sea. The single word embodies both his intellect and the far-reaching curiosity that must have been cultivated by Aristotle, end quote. So you can kind of see that, you know, we don't know that for sure, but it's hard to imagine that Aristotle didn't have some kind of influence. So we kind of are reduced to kind of making kind of, I guess, intelligent interpretations, I guess you could call it, from the author to decide kind of what was going on. And I think that is an issue and challenge for writing about Alexander. I rarely discuss this either, but the hardback copy of this book is really superb. It has a really attractive blue cover, as you can see if you're watching rather than just listening, with golden leaves. And if you take the cover off, there's this really nice royal purple and gold kind of revealed. There's also colour photography. I don't know if I can get one. There we go. Highlighting some of the modern day sites, statues and treasures. And there's also black and white maps to provide context as you read through, which is really nice. It's a really well produced book. But the main criticism of this book is perhaps that it doesn't always go too deep into what we're looking at. Whether it's kind of Alexander's character, his teachers, his friends. It's more a book of interesting diversions a lot of the time. I think sometimes this is due to the paucity or reliability of the sources, or lack thereof. But really, one could say that this is true for many topics in ancient history. So perhaps there are better books for rigorous dissection of all the sources and whether what people were saying about Alexander were really true. I would actually go as far to say that there are perhaps even better biographies for just covering everything. You know, this is a book that it goes off on tangents at times, such as talking about gymnasiums, hunting, or Alexander's burial chamber. You could kind of argue they're more or less important for understanding the young Alexander. But when it's accepted as such that, you know, it's more of an interesting sort of tale about what's going on, it's more allowing itself to go into these diversions, I think you enjoy it a lot more. And I think that because I have read other books on Alexander, I'm not so bothered by the fact it does this. I'm not sort of getting the information for the first time. So in terms of final score though, having said all this, the book is really well written, especially in terms of the prose and the descriptions. It fits more into this descriptive and enjoyable read category rather than stern and factual history book category. And one problem, like I said, is that perhaps it doesn't always delve deeply enough, but I don't think that's necessarily a common issue. I think just here and there I felt that was the case. And, you know, it does decide to limit from the title to Alexander's younger years. So there is a summary after page 364, kind of summarising his later years, which I kind of thought unnecessary, to be honest, because if you're buying a book called The Young Alexander, that's kind of what you expect to get. But maybe some do find some use for it. But I would say that there's other biographies written on Alexander that provide a better summation of his entire life. So you'd be better off just going to those rather than reading something that's a bit brief here. And actually, for this whole book, it kind of fits into that niche where it's not going to give you a comprehensive detailing of Alexander and what he did. But it is very enjoyable. The book is produced really well. And actually, there's not a huge amount wrong with it. It's just that you sort of have to expect these diversions and just allow them to happen. And then I think you'll actually really enjoy it. So I'm giving this one a 7 out of 10. It's a strong book. It's really nice to read, but There's probably more comprehensive ones, so I would suggest either reading this alongside another book on Alexander if you're trying to get all the factual information, or just read it for enjoyment. It's up to you, obviously. But thanks for watching. Like and subscribe for many more ancient history book reviews amongst much more, and I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.